Hi, everybody, and welcome
Hi
to
everyone.
episode 5. Hello,
Yes, 5. It's episode
episode
5.
5. Are you making fun of me? Episode
No.
5 of Two Gays, One Episode. I'm Alex.
And I am GoatJesus.
What are we doing today, Michael?
We're talking about episode 16 of Neon Genesis Evangelion, and just 16 this time. We're actually doing one episode. Oh my god. So
My
previously in
concept.
previous episodes, we were mainly focusing on one episode, but we were talking about like 2 to 3 episodes per episode.
Yes,
Yeah.
fill in the
Um
gaps.
and
And what
and
is this episode, Michael?
I mean, this episode is those who longed for the shadows of others and thus invited them shadowedly.
And thus
Uh,
disgrace themselves by
yeah,
overstepping their bounds and being egotistical.
yes. This is the episode that mainly focuses on the angel Liliel and kind of goes into Shinji's ego as well as other characters' ego as they face their inner selves. Okay. Um, and this episode is famously lower quality than the rest of the episodes in the series. Like if you watch the Blu-ray release of this or the Platinum DVDs, it's going to look kind of jank compared to the other ones, just not as sharp, not as crisp. The colors are crushed or blown out. Like the blacks are too black, the whites are too white. And this comes out to be the way it is because they actually lost the 16 millimeter film strips that were the basis for all the remasters going forward. This was based off of a 35 millimeter interpositive, which an interpositive is kind of like a negative of a negative, sort of. I'm just oversimplifying it. But it's a backup strip, essentially, that it's copied over before the airing of something goes. So we're getting basically like VHS quality, like TV quality from the 90s with this one. Um, and it's a really a shame because this episode's gorgeous. Like I don't know what you think about it, but this is one of the prettier episodes in some ways.
I always thought it was weird how blurry Lilia looked in like every photo.
Yeah, that's because it's based off of like a really bad print. So
Yeah. I think this episode looks great. I was as we were watching through it recently. And there's just so many nice shots. The use of shadow is great and is very thematic.
yeah.
But before we get into all that, let's just recap what happened.
Oh no
Let's
no
just
no
go
no no.
through the plot. Sorry.
Yeah, so in the kind of like plot of this one, we have Shinji who is basically told, "Oh yeah, like you're number one, you're the best. Your test scores are great, Shinji. Your sync is great." And it kind of fuels his ego, and he encounters his angel, and decides to sort of act impulsively because of this ego trip, and gets captured by the angel, sent into this alternate dark dimension where he talks to the angel, and which kind of like um, takes the form of himself and an alternate version of himself that goes like, Shinji, you're kind of stupid, and then Shinji is saved by his mother's soul, which comes out in the Eva, takes control of the Eva. The Eva goes berserk, breaks out of the angel in the prison dimension that he was placed into, and that's the episode's like kind of plot in a nutshell. But what's really good about the opening of this episode is that we get this fun scene where Shinji's like serving food and Asuka comes in half naked, dressed up in a towel, and
They
she
kind
kind
of
of
repeat the gag from episode 3, I think.
it's episode 2, but it's sort of like that, but it's not a repeat of the gag. It's not like 2.0 or whatever
It's a
where.
callback though. It's a callback.
Yeah, but Asuka bursts in and she accuses Misato. She's like, "You're disgusting with you're in your new relationship with Kaji is fucking filthy."
Your
Bleep that
illicit
out.
relation. I don't know what's
But
illicit about their relationship. But
she basically this acts as a kind of like natural way to recap what happened in last episode, because you have like Asuka accusing Misato of like, "You and Kaji are together now and it's disgusting," and then Misato says, "No, we're not in a relationship," and then Kaji goes on the like
somebody's
calls
jealous.
Kaji calls on the phone and is like, "Hey babe, I'm gonna pick you up at 8. We're gonna go to the bar together." And then like
Yeah.
and then
She's
there's this
immediately
awkward
undermined
moment
by
where,
Kaji on the phone. He was
yeah,
probably
exactly.
jumping over a gap and doing a forward roll as he was calling her, by the way.
Yeah, he's
Just to,
dive rolling from nerve headquarters. um, but
I think it's the only time he appears in this episode, actually, isn't it? He doesn't appear. He doesn't speak or appear again. So it's
no,
just this one gag
yeah,
of
it's
Masato
just
being like,
this.
"Me and Kaji aren't dating," and Kaji coming on the phone being like, "So, baby, what's up?"
Yeah, but what I like about this is that this is exposition that's
Mhm.
done quite elegantly, as especially compared to most anime, because a lot of anime, like I was watching Attack on Titan recently. Oh my god, their exposition is just horrible in that show. Like they'll have like a character who does something like, and then another character is like, "Wow, I can't believe he did that thing." In this specific way, so it's like, oh, Aaron escaped this attack and to create a distraction for Armin to sneak up from behind, and this character goes, "Oh my god, I can't believe Aaron escaped my attack, and Arm was using Armin to make a distraction or whatever so he could sneak up from behind." And it's just it's characters saying the same thing that you've already just seen, and they do this all the time in anime. And I wonder if it's because of like a manga adaptation decay kind of thing, where maybe in a manga it's harder to tell like the exact like order of operations that events occur, and so characters just recap something, but then they end up taking that in anime, and that's largely what exposition is sort of in anime, is just recapping things that you've already just seen, that you've just
Yeah.
seen 2 seconds ago. But this is an example of exposition of a previous episode where it's like, okay, we want to just like make sure that the audience knows that Misato and Kaji are together, and how Asuka's feeling about it, and it just creates the scene where Asuka would come
Mm.
at Misato like this, because with it's exposition through conflict, where they're using conflict as a way to kind of nestle that exposition. It's very
What's
natural
real?
that Asuka
It's
comes
also
in and
just
accuses Misato.
yeah.
Yeah,
It's also just really important to establish what all the relationships are at the moment because
yeah,
this episode is really about all these different relationships. It's about how does Asuka feel about Shinji, how does Shinji feel about Asuka, Masato, Rei, Ritsuko. Like everyone's almost in this episode. All the
yeah. Well, I mean,
core
Asuka
characters.
also kind of like recaps us on Shinji a little bit too, because she accuses Shinji. She's like, you just keep saying you're the worst. You just keep saying sorry for everything. And he's like, I'm sorry. And she's like, see, you're nothing but a submissive man child and whatnot. And
Yeah.
she
Well, and
kind of
that's
like
going to be really
loses
thematically
for
important in this
so
episode too.
yeah,
Uh,
she humiliates him, which is the crux
while
of
she's
the
being
beginning of
humiliated
everything.
because she's
Yeah,
that's almost interesting is that there's these things tie together thematically and Evangelion's really good at this having the opening scene kind of tell you what the whole episode's going to be about, who the core players are and what themes we're going to explore. So it's a Masato Asuka Shinji story, raised in it a little bit, Ritsuko's in it a little bit, but that's primarily where the focus is this sort of triangle of Masato Asuka Shinji.
yeah.
um and I was going to say something. Yeah, and it's about humiliation, and that's what this opening gag with the the can of beer and Oscar being naked kind of establishes too, which is what it was about originally too, in the episode two.
So
What they're calling back
the
to.
true inciting incident comes a little later, though, where the thing that kind of throws events in disarray, like the thing that's really unusual that happens, is that Shinji passes a sync test and gets like full marks on that,
Yeah.
and he's surpassed Asuka in sync ratio, which is or
Hmm.
sync ratio, in
Whatever that
kind of like
means.
numbers.
Does
Uh,
it matter that what it means? I don't think it does.
no, it doesn't. It just means that he's connecting with the Ava unit, where he has more like control more easily, I suppose. Um,
Hmm.
but yeah, this fuels his ego, and is generally like the conflict that we're dealing throughout this whole episode is just ego. Um, and that comes into play later with the literal shadow angel. That's kind of a Jungian shadow, and
Hmm.
confronting the ego through the shadow. But yeah, Misato says the famous line, "Hey, you are number one," and that's something that I always remember about this one.
You are number one. Her English isn't too bad.
Yeah, actually, it's pretty good. Yeah,
Yeah, she had a lot of practice being Sailor Moon.
yeah.
Sailor Moon.
And Asuka then goes to Rei and kind of tries to confide in her with girl talk in the locker room, being like, "Can you believe that Shinji? Can't believe that he surpassed them."
And Ray doesn't care.
Yeah, Rei, Rei doesn't care. Um, So what do you think? Like, what do you think about this? Because he's like, Asuka's trying to confide in Rei. You know, I guess it's kind of like a girl talk kind of thing, or trying to relate to her about this.
I think Asuka is just venting to anyone who will listen, and Ray doesn't talk, so she's able to just vent at Ray nonstop.
She was sort of expecting Rei to talk though, because Rei just kind of gets up and leaves, and she's just pissed about that.
She just gets mad about it.
Yeah, it's Asuka's like isolation really starts here, where
Well, I think
like
Asuka's really lonely. I think
yeah,
Asuka's a very lonely character.
I mean, it really starts in the previous episode, doesn't it? Because like Asuka was hoping that Kaji
It
would be
starts
there
the
for
minute
her.
she notices, and this is the point I was trying to make in our last episode. It starts the minute she notices Masato and Kaji are back together.
Yeah, and
That's
that's
when it started.
like that crestfallen kind of expression she makes as like, you know, Kaji breaks free from her arm. You know, she's clinging to her arm, and she just lets go, and she walks away. And that's the beginning of the end for Asuka. This is kind of like the descent
Yeah,
arc that we're going on, and it gets even worse that, you know,
it's
since
just one
Rei is,
humiliation after the other.
yeah, it's like Rei is just like, basically, I don't give a hoot a nanny about you redheaded
I
girl,
don't
and
give
she
a
just leaves.
nanny.
Yeah.
I don't give a rat's patootie about just a southern Paula Dean. Um, I was gonna say too I mean I guess I just want to talk about those women long for the touch of others more, but that
Southern
moment
Belial.
when when she notices Kaji's wearing her perfume and she immediately turns on Shinji, who she'd been kind of bonding with throughout that episode, and just immediately turns on him and goes like, "I hated kissing you. You're ugly. I hate you." And she walks away.
Yeah.
It's
It's
just she
it,
immediately lashes out.
it's because, you know, Asuka's, and we'll discuss this later in episode 22, but she was abandoned by her parent in a way, like kind of like neglected. I mean, she was there,
Yeah.
like her parent was there, but ignoring her. And so to be like kind of pushed aside and ignored is what Asuka hates the most. And that's
Yeah.
what Rei did here, and that's what Kaji did in the previous episodes. Just kind of brush her off, and that's kind of
Yeah,
like
Oh, you're
getting to the
right.
point.
Ray is
The
like her mother. I've never
yeah,
noticed that. I'm sorry.
it's like to getting to the point of the psychological wound there. Yeah, exactly. So Rei is the mother. Yeah, yeah. Rei
Ray is
is
her mother.
literally a mother figure in all respects, not just to Shinji, and is also the doll, right? The doll that gets
She's
tied
the
in later. Yeah,
doll.
yeah. So it really
But
ties into the
she's the doll. She in this metaphor, she's both her mother's doll and her mother,
yeah.
because her mother was there but didn't recognize her, and
Hmm.
she's looking for Ray to kind of connect with her, and yeah, but she won't. And I mean, I guess thinking of it more, Hikari is almost the one who doesn't talk back, because Asuka will just tell her things. She'll be like, "Yeah, you're right, Asuka. Yeah, okay, Asuka. If it's not too much
Yeah,
trouble, can you do that?" Like, she just bullies
like
Hikari constantly.
Hikari is the doting one who like really, yeah, 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 exactly.
She's just a little
Um
puppet.
so Rei obviously is rejecting Asuka here, because we're going to get more throughout this episode that Rei has formed a kind of emotional connection to Shinji. Very clearly here, she kind of stands up for him a couple times, and we'll get to that. But I think that's really interesting. It's like Rei is motivated to ignore Asuka here, which is nice. So it kind of speaks to something larger that is going on with her character. Something's happening with Rei, guys. She's getting
Yeah.
development. Uh, um, okay, and then for kind of like 4 minutes in, Shinji's in the bus, like after being praised and after the scene in the locker room with Asuka and Rei, and he's in the back of this bus, and he's kind of like stretching his hand and like opening and closing it.
Common
um
motif.
yeah, and it's this common motif, and it parallels that bloody hand at the start, where like Shinji, he basically was motivated by someone being in danger and helping someone to pilot Ava. But here it's like he's being motivated by the praise that Misato just gave him. It's like praise is motivating him now. And then there are kids at the front of the bus, and they're kind of laughing at him as he's doing this because he goes, yes, or whatever, he's like proud and whatnot. And these kids at the front
Look
of
at
the
that
bus are just
loser.
like,
Proud of
look at
himself
that
in
loser.
Japan. Who does he think he is? Go on, sorry.
And suddenly that validation turns to embarrassment, and it kind of reveals the fragility that Shinji actually has. He's really brittle. His ego is just brittle, fragile. It's falling apart in like a lot of ways. It's so easy to shatter Shinji and his sense of pride, and it's because it just doesn't come from an authentic place. Praise is temporary. If you aren't confident in yourself, then anything someone's gonna say is just gonna like break you, right? Like for example, me in the YouTube comments section, right? So it's like, oh, I'm proud of this video and all the nice comments, but then that one person says something mean, and suddenly my whole ego
and then you
is
talk about it for 3 days. And...
yeah, exactly. I'm sad. I'm staring up at the ceiling. I'm going, the ceiling isn't familiar. And I'm like,
I hate the unfamiliar ceiling. Even though if it was unfamiliar, how can I hate it?
I'm gonna tell that ceiling how I feel.
How can it still be unfamiliar? I've seen it 4 times.
And then directly after this kind of scene, that which I would argue is kind of like the first act, that's kind of marks the ending of the first act. We get the entry into the second act, which is the entry of Angel Time, Liliel, who
Yes.
I guess is the soccer ball angel. Is that what it translates to in
I would say
ancient
zebra. It's
Aramaic?
the zebra stripe angel. But yeah, Liliel is the angel of shadow or night, the night, angel of the night.
Yeah.
And its name, or their name, depending on how it identifies, is
Angel
the
pronouns.
Maw of God.
The Maw of God, interesting. I guess
are-
that kind of makes sense because it
or
sort
the-
of literally consumes Shinji in a way. And the night aspect parallels the shadows. They're kind of like an important motif.
Yeah. And
Also,
night is
a
the
large part of this
unknown.
episode takes place at night too. Like most of this episode takes place at night.
It does actually, yeah,
Yeah.
you're right. And it's also that the night, I mean, historically, kind of primevally, is the time of when things are scary because predators come out at night, wolves and tigers and things, and it's also when you kind of huddle in and you kind of cocoon yourself, you hide away until the sun rises again.
Liliel's probably my favorite angel up to this point. I don't know if you agree or disagree with that.
I disagree. Well, no, actually, I don't really disagree. I really like Ursfiel, but I also really like Liliel.
Liliel is just like really interesting in terms of the story function in this episode, and kind of like what is being tested with the character, because it is kind of, as you said, the angel of the night, but it's acting as sort of the first preview into how angels are going to operate from here on out. Like episode 15 really marks a turning point for Evangelion, and episode 16 just like cements that with the angel structure. It's much more like overtly character driven at this point, where the angels are going to start to confront. Yeah, they're going to start to confront them psychologically and really like tear them apart and emotionally, and that's kind of especially the next few ones, like right building up to Zeroel. So it's like. Yeah, and then from there,
Zero is the one exception. For the ones that are left, there's 5 left, I think.
Yeah, there's 5 left, and
there's 5 left after this one. There's 5. Zero's the one exception. He's just like a big, muscly guy that like kills things. He's not. There's something psychological about him.
but I think that there is like a psychological component in terms of just like tearing the character apart in some ways. Like still
in a different way, but yes.
Yeah. It's
because I think a lot of the last 5 angels, or last 6, including this one, is really about tearing down what we know and what is comfortable.
Yeah,
I think that's what they really do. It stops being about, oh, can I fight an angel, and can I fight this angel who is challenging me in a way that I'm not accustomed to.
Yeah. There's also like it's kind of got a similar design to that of Ramiel in some ways, where it's just this weird object floating. There's not really like appendages or a face of any kind or like a tail or
Oh yeah,
anything. It's just
I was gonna say that there's nothing androgynous about it. There's nothing and sorry, like androgy in the like andro is what I was thinking of. There's nothing human about it.
yeah.
It doesn't have arms or legs or
This is one of the most
face.
furthest removed from a humanoid type of angel that we've seen since Ramiel, and it's probably the most dangerous also since Ramiel. Like
Mm,
Shinji
yep.
actually is like close to dying throughout a lot of this episode. This is a very like life or death kind of angel in a lot of ways. It's so far from removed from the 0.0001% angels before, where they didn't really have a problem killing them actually. So,
Yeah, that plane went off without a hitch. There was no problem there at all.
it's like we have a 0% chance of doing this, Misato, and Misato's just like, yes, but we, you know what, we have each other and we will defeat it, and then they do. So,
And then they did, and there was no
yeah,
problem at all.
this is kind of like a very the
Maybe Ritsuko's
state.
just really bad at. She's great at science, but she's really bad at math. She's like, oh crap, I forgot to carry 7 zeros. It was actually a 100% chance to win.
From here on out, the stakes get much higher. The stakes are more clearly life and death, including Zero, right? Like characters are close to being dead a couple times, and that's
Yeah, the characters
uh
personally, not just the city, not just the day is in danger, but
yeah.
Asuka, Rei, Shinji, Masato are all in danger of either losing their minds or dying.
I guess that's what the turning point between episode 15 and onward is, that things get personal in general. So,
Mm-hmm. Absolutely.
and
Uh,
go on.
yeah. No. I have something to say later. I'm sorry. It'll be more fitting later to talk about.
Yeah, yeah. So Shinji and Rei and Asuka kind of like go and decide to like approach this angel, and they take a stealth approach this time, which is kind of it's interesting because that's not really something that we've seen the Ava units do up to this point, but they're really really
Mm-hmm.
weary of this one, and they're using a stealth approach that Masato kind of like lays down for them. Um,
They're planning, they're strategizing, which is a follow up to the day Tokyo 3 stood still, where they had to kind of come up with the plan themselves, but also follow through on that plan. So it's not just a really simple, straightforward scheme. It's like, okay, we're gonna, because they don't know what to expect. They haven't analyzed this angel because they don't know anything about it.
Also, Shinji decides to be like a little bit of a little turd over here, and it's just like, remember Misato,
It's
I
a
was number
man's
one. So
job.
this is a man's job, and
It's a man's job, ladies. You can sit down while a real man handles this, and just like flexes his like non-existent bicep.
yeah,
Um,
he's just like, look at these muscles. And Shinji,
look at this arm.
and then
I lift.
so
I cook eggs one time a day.
Shinji's hoping that he's gonna get some real like praise from doing this and keep that
Yeah.
validation cycle going, and he does the same kind of opening closing hand bit from the bus before deciding to break from the plan of doing kind of like a stealth engagement, and fully engages in combat here, kind of like and is immediately punished for it. Shinji gets captured by the angel. There's a shadow that opens up beneath him, and he gets sucked into this alternate shadow dimension. Um,
The
yeah,
which is the real angel. The shadow is actually what the angel is. The
yeah. The
ball is
ball
just
is
its
like more of the
reflection. However
distraction,
that
or
makes any sense.
but that it does make kind of sense, because it's like there's a true angel and a not true one in some ways, which
Hmm.
has to do with the Jungian shadow thing in the first place, where like
Hmm.
there's the ego, in sort of Jung's kind of description of it. There's the ego, and then there's the subconscious, which is the true self in some ways, like and that kind of like doppelgangerness is something
Hmm.
that is really important thematically
Yeah,
here.
so it's less its reflection and more just like its stand-in, its face.
Yeah, there's the true self and the not true
It's also
self.
about deception, and I think this episode is largely about self-deception, and then I think a little bit we'll get with Ritsuko and Masato. There's some actual deception going on.
Yeah. Soon after this, Ray gets some development, and kind of like she decides to push back a little bit on, Misato saying to fall back, and Rei's just like,
Hmm.
no, we gotta save Shinji. And that's
Which
that's
is
kind
sweet. I
of,
like that.
yeah, it's kind of like showing that she cares about somebody other than Gendo. So it's kind of like, okay, we're
Yeah.
opening up, and she's also thinking a little bit independently and being a little defiant, and that's kind of forwarding her character a bit. And then we get that whole stuff with Misato and Ritsuko and Asuka that you were discussing.
Mm-hmm. Yes, that's sorry, are we at the point after he's been eaten by the angel?
Yes, so Shinji's like
Yeah.
totally been eaten by the angel, and like
Okay, yeah.
Asuka
So
and Rei
what's
managed to
going
escape.
I think largely what's going on here character wise is Masato at the end of the last episode found out that there is a dead or in a coma or unconscious or something or dormant angel at the heart of terminal dogma that she didn't know about. And
Yes.
Kaji basically has told her he's there. It's there because Gendo knows it's there, and Ritsuko knows it's there. Ritsuko, who is Misato's best friend, who's been her best friend for like 10 years, and probably is a big part of the reason that Misato is as strong and confident a person as she is, has been lying to her and deceiving her about what's going on. Not only is this a betrayal as a friend, but they work together every day. And Ritsuko's not in charge. Ritsuko is just the scientist. Misato is in charge. I don't know who outranks who. Actually, doesn't that come up in this episode? Doesn't
Ritsuko
Ritsuko try
actually
to?
kind of takes control of the operation. She usurps Misato. So even if Misato
Yeah, she
is
usurps
higher
Misato. I
ranking,
don't know what Ritsuko's rank is. Do we
Ritsuko
know
has
what?
some. I don't know, but she has some secret. Like she's definitely like in the know in the know more than Misato, and definitely higher ranking behind the scenes at least.
Yeah,
So
she has more cachet, I
yeah,
suppose. I don't know if she has an official rank or not.
Ritsuko's rank
But I
is
mean, Masato just lets her do it, so there must be
as the
there must be a
technobabble scientist. That's her official ranking.
yeah. Well, I
Technobabble
mean, even in like Star
scientist.
Trek and stuff, all the doctors and scientists all have ranks. They all have actual like they're all lieutenants or captains or something. Um,
Yeah.
like Scotty is the second officer on the Enterprise, just to show what a nerd I am, but he is. Uh, yeah, and so yeah, so that's a lot of what's going on here between Masato and Ritsuko is the sense of betrayal and the sense of deception because Masato is also
She's chief, by the way. She's chief. So
I don't. That's not a military rank. I don't know what that makes
it's
her.
yeah. It says rank and title chief of Project E, which is Ava, I guess. So
I guess that means she outranks Masato. I'm not sure. Masato's a major. That's pretty high up. So I don't know. But then I don't think Gendo has a military title either. So military rank either. I guess Ritsuko technically outranks
isn't he
Masato
commander?
then.
Commander Akari? Like
He's
Gendo?
commander.
Yeah.
Okay, yeah, commander would be I don't know. There's so many different structures too. Like there's the Navy, there's the Army. I don't know what Nerve is necessarily. So I guess Ritsuko outranks Masato, but
Yeah, as
she's
chief.
not the operations. She's not in charge of operations, and Masato is. I guess that's the idea.
Yeah, she's
Um,
like, okay, so she's like a captain. Misato's like captain and major and stuff,
yeah,
and Ritsuko is like chief officer of Project E, and Gendo is like a commander. Yeah, yeah. So whatever.
yeah. So he's the commander. I mean, I think that means he's in charge of everything. And then Fuyutsuki is whatever Fuyutsuki is. He's professor. He's the professor.
Fuyutsuki is Smithers. He's ranked Smithers.
Yeah, I think Fuyutsuki is the second in command. I think
Yeah.
he's in charge after Gendo. Um, because he usually takes charge whenever Gendo's not there. Uh, yeah, and they say, yeah, whenever Fuyutsuki and Gendo both leave, they go, "Oh, Masato, I guess you're in charge." Like they say that. So
I think he's like Fuyutsuki is a deputy commander, by the way. So
yeah. So he's second in command. Yeah.
yeah.
Um. Yeah. Anyway, that's not really that important, but
The
yeah.
military
So Ritsuko
rankings
has
of Ava.
Ritsuko
You didn't
has
know
the
you
right.
cared about it until we talked about it.
You didn't know you cared about it until just now.
Yeah.
So Ritsuko has the right to overturn whatever Masato's trying to do. But also, what I was going to say is Masato is deceiving Ritsuko because she knows that Ritsuko is hiding something, but she's not telling her. She's not confronting her about it. So she is mad at Ritsuko, but she won't tell her. So there's conflict going on between them right now, which is kind of sad because as we rewatch this, I really love their friendship. It's one of my favorite aspects of the show.
Yeah, Misato and Ritsuko have such great chemistry together, and they really are like the gal pals that make it work, as opposed to like Rei and
Hmm.
Atsuka, who are like the gal pals that jumped
Asuka
into a
wants to be gal
furnace.
pals with Ray,
So,
I guess.
at first, and then she's like, "We're mortal enemies now."
We're mortal enemies. I
Rei is
cannot
no
abide you.
longer my friend.
You're a
Uh,
doll. You're a
Rei is no longer my friend. My new friend is nobody. Asuka
my new
cries.
friend is Hikari, but then Hikari leaves, so I don't know. My new friend is the Sony is the Sega Sega Saturn
The Sega Master
2.0.
System. Yeah. um,
Whatever
the
it is.
After this confrontation, Misato and there's like a lot of shadow play that kind of goes on in this, like where it's like, okay, you have like Misato and Ritsuko kind of like silhouetted in darkness, and then Misato kind of like smacks Ritsuko after Ritsuko says that Shinji is expendable, and kind of like uh and then there's this like airplane that flies overhead and it kind of lights up the scene, and then we have like the scene descend back into shadow as like Ritsuko is just
Hmm.
like, but you're a horrible like mother to him, and you're the kind of the reason
This
that
is all
he
your
decided
fault.
to like,
She says to Misato, "This is all your fault."
yeah, you can't keep control of Shinji. And so yeah, it's like, even if Shinji's expendable, there's kind of like there's the sense that Ritsuko still sort of cares, and it feels bad about it, but she's also blaming Misato and being like, well, look, girl, like, I'm gonna be real with you. You've been kind of like a terrible mother, terrible commander. And it's sort of like shaming her and acting as that kind of Jungian shadow whispering in her ear, and then kind of walks off into the shadows. And
Hmm.
this episode was directed by Tsurumaki, that is to say. And Tsurumaki is like Ano's underling, and he does a lot of shadow play throughout this
His
episode.
protege. Let's give him a little more credit than that. He's his protege.
Did I say underling? I did.
You said underling. He's his
Yeah.
goblin slave.
Tsurumaki is, I would honestly really have a ton of respect for Tsurumaki, like especially hearing about his work on Eva as like a whole, because he's one of the people that really challenges Ano. You know, Ano didn't want to include Asuka originally in the rebuilds, and Tsurumaki was like, Asuka is like one of the beating hearts of Eva. You can't make an Eva remake without Asuka. And so
Oh,
Asuka got added because he really pushed for that character. Like, he really thinks that she
yeah.
adds like so much to the dynamic. And
And he is very accomplished. He worked like Fooly Cooley was his baby, wasn't it?
Yeah, Fully Cooley was his baby, and he also spoke like about how like Mari shouldn't have been included and yada yada. Yet he's like
Well,
he challenges Ano quite heavily in a lot of ways, which I really respect him for that. And he's also
hmm,
done good work on His and Her Circumstances, and like Die Buster. Yeah, Fully Cooley. I'd love to see a new anime directed by him. He was originally wanted to write and direct the final Rebuild movie when Ano didn't want to, and then like kind of Ano kind of pushed him out from that position. But I think it would have been really cool to have seen what he did for that, because he's a really talented director, and this episode is really really well directed in terms of just like the lighting. It's
yeah.
very cinematic. Characters are leaning in and out of shadow, like with the scene where Asuka confronts Rei, or Rei confronts Asuka, really, because like Rei goes like, you're just piloting Ava because you want praise, girl. And then
Is that why
Asuka's,
she questions her?
yeah,
I don't know.
and then Asuka's like,
I don't
no,
speak
I'm
Japanese
piloting it
well
for
enough, but
myself. And it's like, Asuka can say that she's piloting it for herself all she wants, and I guess in a way she is, but it's still for like the
well,
validation
she's.
of being the best at something to be needed, you know.
Hmm. Well, I think she
So
lords it over Shinji because Shinji constantly wants approval from other people, and Asuka very pointedly says she doesn't.
but
And maybe
she
she
but
doesn't.
she absolutely
But
does. I mean, she flaunts herself sexually to people for that reason. Like, she loves the
yeah, it's
popularity,
the
loves to be
constant.
praised.
It's the constant push and pull of her character, which is you should praise me, but I don't care if you do, but you should. Like, it's so strange. Um,
She says she doesn't care what other people think, but totally does. It's like one of those, her ego is so inflated because of
yeah.
that, of how little her ego actually is in reality. Like if she had a Jungian shadow, it would be that she has like absolutely no belief in herself, which is the true sort of self, kind of speaking in that instance. Um, So let's talk a little bit about Jungian Shadow, because I think it's really key to this episode. It's really key to this show.
Okay. I
Yeah.
don't know anything about Jungian Shadow. I'll just ask you questions, I guess. Go
Yeah.
on. What's a Jungian Shadow?
Okay.
What is a Jungian Shadow?
A Jungian Shadow is the
I know who
unconscious
Jung
self
is.
that Carl Jung was like, yes, famous psychologist who kind of came during and after the Freudian era, and really there's
He was a compatriot of Freud's.
yes,
He was his protege, if anything, I believe.
It's sort of his thinking is sort of one of the pillars of modern psychology in a way. It has a little bit more research behind it than something like Freud, but it's still kind of like a bit introspective in some ways. But Carl Jung
If I can just interject,
Yeah.
Niles Crane on Frasier was a Jungian psychiatrist.
But Jungian
That's
psychology.
my contribution to this conversation.
Jungian psychology is actually more respected than Freudian psychology these days.
Yeah. The gag was Frasier's a Freudian, Niles is a Jungian.
Yeah.
The best joke, just quick, the best joke is when Niles takes over his show for an episode and says, "Well, Frasier is a Freudian. I am a Jungian, so there'll be no pinning it on mother this week," which is great. Anyway, go on. Sorry.
The Jungian shadow is the unconscious self that exists inside us. So if we had our ego is kind of like the self that exists on the foreground, and if there was an iceberg, the shadow would be underneath us, and it's there, and it speaks to the heart of us. It's the voice that says things that are kind of critical about ourselves and is the true self in some ways. It's the us that is more honest about who we are really at our core, and it's not really evil so much as it is revealing, which is an important thing about like the Jungian shadow. And so it's the voice inside your head that barely comes out, that you don't even know that's there, that sort of says like, hey, you've been a very bad boy. And in this case, Shinji's talking to a doppelganger of himself inside. He's trapped in this alternate dimension, this angel dimension, this shadow dimension, which is inside the angel, and he's kind of dying here throughout these scenes. And then he gets these visions, these like hallucinations of probably Liliel, probably the angel talking to him, but acting in place of his shadow, and kind of criticizing him. And the Jungian shadow like kind of expresses how there are different impressions of Shinji inside other people, and this is how you get like enemies and friends. It's because other people have different ideas about who you are based off of the fragments that they've experienced and encountered with you. So if you're like, if you had like a bad day and you let your ugly side out and kind of were a dick to somebody, that person's going to get a totally different impression of you than if you're just like nice to them out of hat and are polite. And both versions are valid. They're both parts of who you are, but they have fragments of you. They don't have the whole picture. And that's what Shinji is kind of afraid of, is that people are going to have a picture of him that is negative, that is bad, that they'll hate him. And he really wants to be praised and validated because he wants to feel loved, because his father abandoned him and caused these psychological wounds by abandoning him. And so what he really wants is he wants love.
Him, really.
Yeah, both his parents did at the end of the day. And Shinji, he wants that external validation, not because of necessarily not being noticed, like with Asuka, where Asuka was not noticed by her mother. Shinji was rejected outright, and is like afraid of others hating him because he's afraid of that rejection. He just wants to be told I love you, and wants to be like allowed into someone's life and be there with them. And that's why he's like so subservient, why he does what other people say, because he hopes that it'll make people feel like they like him, or that there will be a version of him inside them where they'll go like, I love you, and you're cool, and you're awesome.
You're great.
And
You're number one.
You are number one. And so Shinji gets accused by the shadow that of like nursing the few happy moments of praise that his father has given him, like a couple episodes back with the angel.
That's one thing I was going to mention, actually.
Yeah, go ahead. Go talk about it.
At the beginning, I was going to mention this. Sorry, I just remembered.
Yeah.
So Shinji is in a good spot at the beginning of the episode. because he's just had this great experience with his father where they spent more than 5 minutes together without Gendo telling him he was a waste of time. That's what I was gonna say. I'm sorry, it's way too late now, but
Yeah,
I thought that was
and
funny. Anyway.
and but Shinji also got praised, a couple episodes earlier with the angel that was falling with on the intercom where he's like, "Good job, Shinji," and whatnot.
Good
So,
job, Shinji.
um,
Good job, pilot of Unit 1, Shinji Ikari. Oh my god. Praise from my father. He sent me a form letter. On this date. Sorry, go on.
so Asuka wants to be noticed and praised for being the best, but Shinji wants to be praised for being like loved, like to be like he just wants to be told,
They
I
both want
love
the
you.
same thing, I'd say.
Yeah, in sort of slightly different ways, but yes, ultimately the same thing. And
Their approach is different. I think their goal is the same.
the goal is the same. The approach, yeah, and it's to get to the it's the want versus need thing again, where Shinji wants external validation. He needs internal validation because internal validation lasts longer when you come from a place of like self-love, where you're like, I'm confident in myself. I don't have like anxiety and depression because I've dealt with that, and I don't need other people to say I love you. I can just know that, and be content with it, and that's like what he really needs. And it's a very important thing in a character arc for a character's like want versus need to be opposites from one another. And
Michael, can you explain to me and remind me what is a want versus need? Can you use a famous film to explain
Sure.
what a want versus need is?
So in the case of like a want versus need, it's like a character's psychological goal. It's not necessarily the same thing as like a goal of a second act. So like the goal of pretty much every second act episode here in Ava is to stop the angel, to defeat the angel.
Unless
But
it's a Satsukawa episode, then it's the third act.
yeah, but the want, the psychological want, is that praise. Like, so Shinji's goal is to defeat the angel, but his want is to do it well enough that his father says, I love you," in his praise and stuff.
I
And
love you.
so,
I was wrong to abandon you at that zoo or wherever he left him.
and the want versus need is the basis for a character arc. Like, it's one of the most like fundamental core things in a character arc. So you'll have something like Hamlet, right, whose want is revenge. He wants revenge, and his need is forgiveness. And because he doesn't actually get forgiveness, or it does forgive his uncle, or like even second guesses, maybe I'm not experiencing a ghost of my father. Yes, that's what makes it tragic, because he never acquires the need. He only gets the want. And so if you get the want a lot of the time, and you never get the need, that is a tragedy. That's what fundamentally makes something tragic. And if you have like the want versus need out of alignment, a lot of people feel very unfulfilled by that, because it means that they didn't learn something. The point of a want versus need is to be philosophically incorrect at the start of the story, then realize that the philosophy or the idea that you thought was important was bad, and then like kind of like embrace the opposite of that, which is the good philosophy, the good thing. And you have something like Star Wars, right, which is the famous film we were talking about, and Luke's arc is out of alignment because his want versus need in episode 4 is essentially his want is like to go on an adventure, and his need is to believe in himself. And those, that's the thing. It's like, Luke, trust the Force, believe in yourself, blah blah blah. And the film fundamentally isn't really about that, and he doesn't really grow or learn anything philosophically. It's not like
He doesn't have a
believing
core
yourself.
conflict. The
It's
want
not like
versus need core conflict.
yeah, it's not like believing in yourself is really like a counter to that of adventure. You
Well,
can
the way you
have
put it to me
both
earlier was
adventure
his
and-
want and need are the same. He wants to go on an adventure and be a hero.
Yeah, and his need is
and
to
he
go on an
needs
adventure
to go on an adventure and become a hero.
Become a hero. Yeah, and that's fundamentally what it is. And it's like, and so you have like that out. It's either out of alignment in some ways, and that creates what a lot of people refer to as like a Gary stew or something. And
Yeah.
it's because they
I don't really
learn
like that term, but I get what you mean.
Yeah, but it's because they don't really learn anything and don't grow, and so people kind of like push back against that. And yeah, like Luke wasn't really the reason that people really loved episode 4. It was all the other elements coming together, the special effects, Han Solo, like Princess Leia being cool, and like it's basically everything but Luke almost. So it's a
almost.
yeah, I think Luke wasn't as strong
Famed
until
Shakespearean actor Alec Guinness. Go on, sorry.
it wasn't until episode 5 and 6 that Luke started to, there was a proper writer that came in, Kasdan,
Yeah,
and he really applied
Lawrence
the want
Kasdan.
versus
I love
need.
Lawrence Kasdan. Go on.
Yeah, Lawrence Kasdan applied want versus need to Luke, where now it's like Luke is afraid of the dark side. He wants to destroy it, and in all facets, like internally, externally, he's afraid to be like Vader. He's afraid of the implications of that, and so it's like episode 5 is almost like a tragedy because he does something dark-sided, which is to fight Vader and want to kill him ultimately to save his friends. It was for a good intention, but it was a bad thing. And ultimately, like in the world of Star Wars, like pacifism wins at the end of the day. Because like in episode 6, Luke he got
He
the
doesn't
need.
achieve his need until episode 6.
Yeah, in episode 6, he finally gets the need, which is to reach out and find the light inside the darkness, to reject violence, to throw down his lightsaber and say, like, I'm not going to fight, and to redeem his father. And his father is the one who is, already sort of dark-sided in the first place, but his father gets a little bit of that light side and winds up, like, throwing the Emperor off the into the shaft. So he wins through not fighting in a weird way, and it's kind of it's they really did a good job framing that. And so his want is to destroy the dark side, but his need is to find the light in the darkness, to redeem the dark side. And that's ultimately what it is. And his greatest fear is to be like Vader, but he needs to accept that Vader's a part of him, that they are blood, that he is still good, he can be good. Yeah, it's like that's what it is. And so
effectively, to boil it down, it's his want is to be a hero who destroys evil, and his need is to realize that in order to achieve that, he has to not destroy evil.
Yeah.
He has to embrace
the
good
and
parts
evil
of it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And so that's like that want versus need is much stronger because they are opposite, because Luke does learn something. He gets an arc, he becomes compelling. And I think it's a large reason why episode 5 is so beloved. And I think if not for, episode 6 maybe making some weird decisions, I think episode 6 has a really strong conclusion for Luke as a character. It's very, Kasdan really brought it home there for his arc. So,
In terms of the script, yeah.
yes. And here in Ava, there's a really good understanding of want versus need, whether intentional or not. Sometimes people tap into that like subconsciously because they have experienced storytelling or just know it.
Well,
But
it's a prism with which to interpret a story. It's not necessarily the only prism. It's not necessarily the right prism, but it's a really strong prism. And especially if you're a beginner writer, it's just something really good to be aware of and to look at. Because if you're writing your first screenplay or your first story, it's just something to be like, there should be some core conflict with my character. How do I do that? Well, give them a want and then give them a need that they need to achieve.
Yeah, and it's like it's not necessarily, yeah, as you're saying, it's not necessarily the only way to interpret stories but it is a really compelling one. And at least for me personally, the stories that have connected with me have all really had that to some degree or another. Like, FMA 03 with Edward, like he wants to escape from responsibility and he needs to embrace like the fact that a lot of the stuff he's done and messed up in his life are just forever ruined and messed up. And that's like partly why Edward's such a compelling character, is because he touts this equivalent exchange stuff when
so the want need is so straightforward.
It's like
he wants things to be fair.
He wants things to be fair, and he needs to realize the world is unfair. Yes. So and that's
so simple, and it's so easy to identify. Exactly. It's such a
and it's just so compelling when I see shows like that, right? So
2003 specifically, by the way, I don't think that's his arc in Brotherhood.
No, in Brotherhood, he doesn't have very much of one. But they're going for something a little different there. So
you should make a video about the comparison.
But back to Ava, this whole sequence with Shinji tripping out in this angel dimension is the foundation for all the trip out stuff that we're going to see from here on out.
Yes, it's the beginning, and we see these images recur over and over again. One thing I did want to say before we move on quickly is I think the want need character internal conflict is really good in what a lot of stories are in the modern world in terms of like blockbuster film and animation and stuff, is character driven. They're all very character driven, first off, and they're all very iconographic. I don't know how to say that. I don't know how to put this word or how to parse it, but they're very icon based. Whereas I think in like the olden times, in like the 80s and 70s, you'd have more movies that are like Citizen Kane's a terrible example, but that's not the one I was thinking of. Where you almost have the story, like stories used to not only be based on a single character and watching that character go through a journey, but it'll be like, oh, here's a story about this time period and how things changed in the world and all these different like ensemble piece kind of things. Where I don't think you get the want need quite as strongly because you have more of an ensemble storytelling going on, and the conclusion is more thematic, or it's more about um explaining what a time period was or what a moral was, or giving your story like an
Yeah,
ethos
there's a
rather
movie
than a
called
pathos.
there's a movie
One
called
needs very
like
pathological, I think. Go on, sorry.
there's a movie called like The Long Day Closes that's sort of like that, where it's just this a pastiche of the director's childhood in a lot of ways. It's a
Mm-hmm.
very compelling movie. I think it's still like fairly character heavy, but it's more about just like capturing a time, capturing a
Yeah.
place, capturing a person at this moment. And like films and story can be beyond just like a character driven thing. But yeah, as far as like
Mm-hmm.
just like character focused, like very, very like,
Genre.
yeah, like
Yeah.
genre sort of stuff, it's a really good basis for it. So yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Um
Yep.
and and then we get like Yui coming out to save our boy Shinji over
Our
here.
first appearance by Yui, I think.
Yes, I would say so. I think this is the first time we hear her voice, and it's
Which
Mikumi
they messed up in the
Hayabashi.
dub, the original dub.
Yeah, it's Rei's voice actor in Japanese who is playing Yui.
Yeah, but it's not
And
Amanda Winley in the original dub.
it's not until EOE, and then I think in EOE, Yui was played by both Amanda Winley and
Yeah,
yeah,
Amanda Winley
Rei.
played
Yui and
both
Rei
Yui and
played
Ray. Yeah.
both. Yeah. Um, and Yui saves Shinji here, takes over the unit, and kind of like it's very much her. There's no misinterpreting it.
Yeah.
It kind of takes over the unit, goes berserk. We see the reason why it's able to go berserk and why it has an interest in defending Shinji in his worst times of need. It's because it's his mother's soul inside, which ties into plot elements that are revealed later. It'll pretty much say outright, yeah, your mommy is inside the AV unit. Right now, we're not supposed to know that totally. If you're watching it for the first time, you're supposed to go like, "Oh, what?" So,
Yeah, I don't even think the thought
um,
crosses your mind because you think it's a robot, and if you don't,
yeah,
if you live in a world before Evangelion, there's no stories about like people and robots really necessarily.
and the Ava bursts out of Liliel, in the sort of nightmare dimension that Shinji's been trapped out of, and it's very gory and bloody and like horrifying. It's supposed to be horrific,
Hmm.
and the Ava unit screams, and it's very like it's the first time since
Animalistic.
maybe episode 2 that we've seen the Ava unit be treated as like a monster, an animal. Like, yeah, exactly.
An out of control monster. Yeah.
And it's that Jungian shadow of the Ava, right? It's the true self of the Ava. So I think that's
Yeah.
interesting. And then after that, we get some Rei chilling in the hospital with Shinji, reading her books, watching over him. Uh, and she expresses that she is glad that he's okay, which is pretty cool for a character.
Which is a big step in their
Yeah.
relationship. Yep. Which will
Um,
make it sad when things happen later.
and Asuka's was listening at the door because when Rei leaves, Asuka
Showing
pops
that
out. It's
Asuka
just
cares
like,
about Shinji, but she can't go into the room, or she can't go into the room to tell him she cares, but she
yeah.
wants to know he's okay, which is really cool. Good job, Ano, and whoever wrote this episode. I forget your name. Nice work.
It humanizes her more again, which is always good to see. Like
It's nice. She has such a negative reputation with the fandom. It's nice when she gets these little moments of humanity.
I think that's what I appreciate about her character and the character writing of this. And there's this technique in writing with my screenwriting teachers where they told us, like, if you have a villain, give them a part where you just get a glimpse into their humanity, like that they regret something, or that there's some deeper
Hmm.
level, or they do something nice for someone
Or show them
unexpectedly.
rejecting their own humanity to show
Yeah,
why they're a villain.
it's like it's just give us a glimpse into even the worst people, that there is something deeper ticking underneath, and
Yeah.
whatnot, because that really adds layers. And Ava does that with characters that, you know, are quote unquote unlikable, and I think that's what makes them likable, is seeing those glimpses into like a character like Asuka, that she actually does kind of care about Shinji, that a lot of it is an act, that there's a true self underneath, that um there's someone more compassionate there. So, and Asuka's one of my favorite characters in pretty much anything.
I love
So,
Asuka. I love Asuka.
yeah. You know, distilling her down
We
into just
stan
like a
Asuka in this podcast, so
saying she's just a bitch is just like oversimplifying things like way too much, you know.
I mean, she is a
um,
bitch, but there's reasons she's a bitch.
she's a complex one. She's multifaceted, multi-layered.
Well, I think it's also
Bitches.
pretty hard to like look at a 14-year-old girl and be like, "Oh, she's really full of herself," or "Oh, she's really negative," or "She's really mean." I'm like, "Yeah, she's a 14-year-old girl. She will learn. She will change. You're an adult. Like, you've had experience. She has it. Who's proud of who they were when they were 14? Unless you were like a goody two shoes who didn't try anything."
Asuka is like an onion. She'll make you
She's
cry,
like
but
an
she's got
onion.
layers.
It's got
So,
layers.
yeah. And then we get a mention of
And she
blood at
smells
the
bad.
end.
No, I'm just kidding.
We get a smelling bad. Speaking of smelling bad, Shinji says that he smells blood on himself at the end.
Mhm.
Which I don't know. What do you interpret with that? Because I don't really know. Like, is it
I guess the
motherhood?
idea
Is it
is the Avas are physical beings with blood in them. I think that's
right?
foreshadowing that. That's my
Yeah,
first thought. I think it means a bunch of things, but I think that's the main thing.
yeah. When he was inside the unit earlier, he said it smelled like blood in there, and so maybe it's just like pointing to the organicness. Maybe it's pointing to like a menstrual kind of like motherhood thing. So it could be any of that. You know.
Speaking of
I
Freud,
said it. I
um,
said it. There's Freudian elements in Ava. It's not just Freud. I think people oversell like how much Freud there is. Like a lot of
I
it
was just
is
kidding, but
no. I just want to speak on this real quick. Like
yeah,
a lot of Ava is like about Anno's personal, like very personal journey through depression, and like it's very simple, like philosophically at the end of the day, which is like just like self love is important. And I think I think people oversell maybe how like, oh, you have to read um
psychoanalytical it is.
psycho, yeah, like how much like psychoanalysis, and you know, even I did a video years ago interpreting it as, from a psychoanalytic perspective. But in that video I kind of actually said that Ava criticizes some things about psychoanalysis. So
Yeah,
it's not just like, oh, because I see way too many people, maybe you've seen this too, just go like, oh yeah, Shinji wants to screw Rei, and so it's like it's about the Oedipus complex. And I
I
think
don't think he does, by
I
the
think
way. But anyway,
Oedi- I think Oedipus complex is a motif used throughout Ava, but it's not necessarily like approving of it. It's not a core focus. It's not like, you know, it's just it's something that is there as a thematic way to tie in Rei with Yui as like a character. So yeah, I don't.
yeah, absolutely.
What are your thoughts on this episode? Good,
Overall,
bad?
yeah, it's a good episode. I think we kind of skipped over a scene I really like, which is almost the button for the Masato Ritsuko stuff,
Yeah, go ahead
where
and talk
Ritsuko's
about it.
talking to Gendo at the end with they're wash. First off, they're washing the blood or the menstrual fluid or whatever the hell it is.
The washing machine of life.
The washing machine. God damn it! They're washing off it, and they're standing there staring at it. For some reason, there's a lot of really in-depth, introspective conversations that have with people watching them wash the Evangelion. Like, there's at least two that I can think of. Um, but yeah, so Ritsuko's talking about how like they'll never forgive us if they find out the truth of the Avas. I think this is the first time Ritsuko and Gendo are alone in a scene. Um,
Yes.
and they've identified them as collaborators who have a secret. And yeah, so that's a cool scene. I think it kind of buttons the conflict between Masato and Ritsuko earlier, where I think now we're seeing Ritsuko's side of things because Ritsuko is such a guarded character and we don't really get into her head. And how Masato almost kind of got through to her because they are good friends, and it's just interesting. One other thing I wanted to say, just remembered, I want to talk about the psychoanalytical aspect. I think a lot of people look at Evangelion intellectually, but I think it's a very emotional, pathological show too. And I think a lot of the stuff people get very judgy and intellectually judgy about these 14-year-old kids that are in really difficult situations and don't really have parents to look out for them or care about them or tell them anything worthwhile.
Yeah, it's crazy how much people project like adult expectations on the characters
Like,
from a meta sense.
what does this 14-year-old boy would not want to bang his, like, 28-year-old mother figure? Come on, man. Living with two sexy ladies.
It's kind of gross. It's like
it is a little gross. It's a lot
like,
gross, actually.
The way that the fandom like talks about these characters is just extremely.
I don't see it so much anymore, to be fair. Sorry, I just wanted to mention that.
I see it plenty, but you know, it is really inappropriate. It was especially inappropriate 10 years ago. 10 years ago, it was like everywhere. You know, everyone was talking about sexualizing Asuka and Rey, and kind of like you know, the shipping wars, the love triangle shipping wars, and
they need to know who they're gonna get married to when they're 14. Okay,
Shinji is
not allowed to date.
Shinji's a pussy. Shinji's a pussy. Shinji's a pussy. Shinji's fucking cool. Like, he's a character that
he's a badass.
He's a character that puts aside a lot of his own issues to still do the right thing at the end of the day. And I think there's something really admirable about that. You know, episode 19. How can you watch episode 19 and go like Shinji isn't cool? Because that's like, he's really cool there. So.
That's such a good episode. I mean, I love 19. Ooh.
And him even leaving in the first place is cool. Like, you know, like that's the thing. We'll talk about it when we talk about it. But,
yeah,
you know, he was standing up to his father for his friend. And I think that's really cool. But yeah.
Oh, yeah. They end the episode with the hospital scene. That's really nice. They show the bond between the three characters, and Shinji I think he smiles and laughs at the end, doesn't he?
Yeah. Well, he smiles and laughs so cool. after Asuka.
After all this trauma, he's still got a smile on his face. That's nice, because he realizes that people were worried about him and they missed him, and he's like, "Oh my god, someone missed me." Yeah, that's cool.
And I think he realized that, you know, his ego was a little bit too big and inflated too, especially, you know, after he gets kind of sucked in by the angel. He's screaming for help. He's like, "Please help!" And I think he kind of regrets that. He was so foolhardy in the first place, so you get a little nice, little character arc. Mm-hmm. He's just glad that other people are here. You know,
he's just glad other people are here. Other people, hell is other people, but they're here. Yeah, we're gonna get into Sartre too. Okay. Anyway, there's also the first sign, I think, of that water reflection in this episode.
Yeah,
the
bloop, which is the bloop water.
The bloop, which represents Yui.
Yeah.
Yeah. Anyway, that's cool. I don't know. Okay, do I have anything else to add?
Water is motherhood. That's a Freudian thing. Water symbolizes motherhood. Ooh. But yeah.
The ocean is a woman. The moon is a woman, and the ocean's a woman. So, actually, no. Is the ocean a man? Because then it's the ocean and the moon. Am I getting into weird? Anyway.
Well, water in Freudian sense is motherhood, which I guess is not a coincidence. So.
Anyway. The moon represents Rey, it represents Yui, and the moon is female. I think I said that already, actually. I have a vague recollection.
The moon controls water. So
it does. And I think in Eastern theology, is this just Avatar? I might just be thinking of Avatar, where the moon and the ocean represent push and pull.
Twee and Na.
Female, yin and yang. Yeah. Anyway, thanks for listening. If you enjoyed this episode and you really want to support us and you want to hear more, then subscribe to our Patreon. Pledge on Patreon. I'd really appreciate it. It'd be great.
Yeah, you'll get bonus episodes of us talking about all sorts of stuff. So
yeah, bonus episodes this week. I guess this week we're going to be talking about Better Call Saul, because we're going to do episode reviews for the weekly Better Call Saul episodes.
Heckin' yeah, I'm looking forward to it.
I'm really looking forward to this. I've enjoyed Better Call Saul a lot.
I think
I'm going to put up a poll to see if people are enjoying the bi-weekly releases or if they'd like to see weekly releases. That'll be a public poll to be available on Patreon. You don't have to pledge. So check that out. Anything else? Michael wrote a comic.
Well, I don't want people to know about that.
Okay.
Really.
Michael didn't write a comic. It never happened. Yeah. And
But if you're listening this
yeah,
far, you're probably cool enough that you'd be okay with whatever. So-
Michael never wrote a comic. It didn't happen. It was an illusion. We gotcha. It's a total fabrication. Anyway, I'm done. Thanks for listening so much. I really appreciate it. Bye.
Bye.